Footsteps by Super Claude 1. Oh, yes, we have a ghost, your hostess says, as she leads you to your bedroom. Of course the place would be haunted. The inn is ancient, more than 500 years old. But this was meant to be a relaxing holiday. Go somewhere quiet, your doctor had told you. No surprises, just somewhere to rest in peace. If only your car hadn't broken down, leaving you stuck out here all night. It's a bit boring, really, she continues with a shrug. Nobody has ever seen anything, just heard footsteps occasionally. As your hostess bids you good night and closes the door, you fight against the urge to run to it and barricade yourself in. Instead, you make yourself walk to the door, lock it slowly, and then slowly and carefully go to the window and draw the curtains. As you lie down, you take more deep breaths until your heartbeat slows and you can feel calm again. As you settle down under the covers, you soon find yourself drifting off, only to hear a sound coming from outside your door, in the corridor. Footsteps? No, not footsteps. Don't be ridiculous. You're hearing things. Probably just a waking dream. You gradually drift back to sleep again, only to hear footsteps. Yes, definitely footsteps, and not from a guest. These are hollow, peculiar, and seem to come from the other end of time. Why are you frightening yourself like this? They make your hair stand on end. How could you have thought they were a dream? They have stopped. No, they will keep on coming. They will not stop. Your heart is hammering faster and faster. Please stop! Your breath comes out in shuddering gasps, and you cannot stop it. The footsteps coming closer and closer, louder and louder until suddenly there is silence. Now, you are not afraid anymore. In fact, you feel strangely lighthearted. What an idiot you were, to be actually afraid of a noise. A noise cannot hurt you. You laugh to yourself and turn over to go back to sleep. But strangely, considering how tired you were before, sleep eludes you. Instead, you sit up to see a very curious thing. Slowly, tendrils of mist are gathering at the end of your bed. You watch, entranced, as they form themselves into a ghost. A whiskery old man, dressed in pantaloons, an old-style coat and neckerchief, sitting on the end of your bed, looking at you. But you are not a bit scared. Instead, you are just merely intrigued. You remember the story from earlier. What an odd thing, you say, and your voice sounds hoarse in your ears. My hostess said nobody had ever seen the ghost.
Nobody living.
The ghost replies with a sinister grin.
Your heart stopped beating 5 minutes ago.
My husband didn't believe me when I told him our house was haunted. Deleted author. Did you move my keys? My husband Justin asked. No, I replied. Why would I move your keys? Because they're not in the basket, he gestured. In the foyer of our house was a small wicker basket sitting on an accent table. Whenever we'd come home, we'd toss our keys into the basket so we'd always know where they were. Justin was about to leave for work when he discovered that his keys weren't in the basket where they should be. "Did you check the pants you wore yesterday?" It was more a suggestion than a question. "I didn't leave them in my pants," he snapped. "I put them right here when I got home last night." He jabbed his finger at the basket. "Well, I don't know what to tell you," I replied. "Maybe the—" Justin cut me off before I could finish what I was going to say. "Don't you dare say ghost." He moved his finger so it was pointing at me. "This house is not haunted." Before we moved into the house, I was a skeptic when it came to the existence of ghosts. Now, I was starting to believe they might be real. I couldn't come up with any other explanation for why things like Justin's keys would go missing and then turn up in unexpected places, or why I would leave a room and return to find the lights on when I know I turned them off or the doors open, when I know I shut them behind me. I knew better than to challenge his point of view on the subject, so I just kept my mouth shut. "I guess I'll just have to take your car," Justin huffed as he snatched my keys out of the basket. "I need my car," I said. "I have to go to work too." "You can take my car," he replied, "if you can find my keys." "You know I don't feel comfortable driving your truck," I said. "That's not my problem." He turned and headed for the door. Mad, I lunged for his hands and tried to grab for my keys. "Find your own keys," I said. What happened next shocked me. When my hand closed around Justin's, he whirled around and raised his arm in a motion that could only be interpreted one way. He was going to slap me, but his hand never connected with my face. Before he could strike me, he was thrown backward against the wall. "You bitch!" he yelled, thinking I had pushed him. "It wasn't me," I insisted. "Let me guess," Justin sneered. "It was the ghost." In response, something lifted him off the floor and pinned him to the wall. He tried to speak, but the only thing that came out of his mouth was a choking sound. When he eventually dropped my keys, I grabbed them and ran from the house. A Journey into the Unknown by Chillingchronicles. The road stretched out before me, its black tar surface gleaming in the moonlight. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling the rough leather of its surface against my palms. My headlights illuminated the path ahead, casting long shadows across the trees that lined the roadside. As I drove, the world around me seemed to fade away, replaced by a surreal landscape of shadows and light. The trees twisted and writhed like living creatures, their branches reaching out to touch the sky. The moon shone down, a pale and ghostly presence that bathed everything in its eerie glow. I passed through towns and cities, each one a blur of neon lights and speeding cars. The streets were crowded with people, their faces hidden behind masks and veils. They moved like automatons, driven by some unseen force, their eyes fixed straight ahead. I drove on, my foot heavy on the accelerator, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I was racing towards some unknown destination, pursued by some unseen threat. Every turn in the road brought new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. At one point, I found myself on a narrow bridge that spanned a deep canyon. The wind howled around me, tugging at the car and threatening to throw me over the edge. I held on tight, gritting my teeth, and pushed the car forward. As I drove, I began to see strange visions, flashes of images that flickered in and out of existence. I saw a man in a long coat, his face hidden behind a wide-brimmed hat. He stood on the side of the road, watching me as I passed by. I saw a woman in a red dress, her eyes filled with tears, standing on the edge of a cliff. I saw a child, his face twisted in fear, cowering in the shadows. I drove on, my mind racing, trying to make sense of the visions. It felt like I was caught in a web of secrets, a tangle of clues that led me deeper and deeper into the unknown. Finally, after what felt like hours of driving, I reached my destination. It was a small house on the edge of a dark and silent forest. I parked the car and stepped out, my legs shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked towards the house, feeling a sense of dread rising within me. I knew that something was waiting for me inside, something that would change my life forever. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dark and empty, the only light coming from a single candle that flickered in the corner. In the center of the room, there was a table, and on the table, there was a single envelope. I approached the table, my hands trembling, and picked up the envelope. Inside, there was a note, written in a cryptic code that I could not decipher. And so, the journey that had started with a drive down a lonely road ended in mystery and confusion. The code remained unsolved, the secrets of the road and the visions that I had seen still a mystery to me. But I knew that I had been changed forever by the experience, and that the memories of that night would haunt me for the rest of my days. A Ghost on New Year's by McGeesJabberwock. There are only a few times when I leave the house in which I haunt. Every day in the house feels the same, and the clocks haven't worked for decades. Yet I can tell in my gut, or what counts for one, when a day is special. For example, I always go out for a stroll on Halloween. That day is when I'm expected to be seen roaming the streets. I can't decorate my house for Christmas, so when December 25th comes, I turn myself invisible and look at the decorations in the town square. I also go into the town square invisible on December 31st as well. I was never one for loud music or dancing, even when I was alive. At least I think so. Yet I wait all year to join the humans in their bouncing around as a live band plays. When they count down until midnight, I join in with them. I can't hold any of their hands, yet I sing Auld Lang Syne. The humans celebrate the new year because of things they're looking forward to. I look forward to what's beyond my haunted house, my town, this world, as soon as I can find a way to reach it. The humans celebrate the new year by looking back, by remembering. Remembering is something I need to do. If I can remember how I died, if I can remember why I'm stuck in this world. Most of the year, I spend in my haunted house, scaring away all trespassers, wailing and moaning and rattling chains. It's fun. It gives people some excitement in their lives, yet I can't help but feel there is something more for me out there. I walk among the humans, sharing memories, wishing I had memories of my own to share. I walk among the humans, talking about what they're going to do this year, wishing I had plans of my own. All the while, I say to myself, this year's going to be different. This year, I'm going to remember. This year, I'm going to go beyond. I say that to myself every year. I'm certain one year it will be true. Ghost Hunting Club, deleted author. I stood in the hallway and scanned the flyers on the wall. I transfer schools constantly due to my unusual situation, so making meaningful connections is difficult. Then I spotted what I was hoping to find. The Tilwick Ghost Hunting Club. If a school happens to have one, I join it. If it doesn't, I try my best to start one myself. I eagerly read through the flyer's contents, feeling excited. Name's Derek. Club leader. A guy with glasses said smugly. He nodded his head towards the short-haired girl standing next to him. This is Ada, second in command. Sup, Ada muttered. I'm Seth. I introduced myself and was officially a member of the club. Derek and Ada had been in the middle of planning an expedition. Ada told me about an abandoned house where brutal murders had taken place, a hotspot for paranormal activity. Armed with Derek's cheap-looking ghost hunting equipment and Ada's knowledge of local ghost stories, we set off on our first official hunt. With darkness enveloping Tilwick, we had nothing but the streetlights and our resolve to guide us through the night. We snuck round back, and Ada picked the back door's lock with a hairpin. We briefly looked around before setting up in the living room. Derek placed his spirit box and Ouija board, and Ada set up her video camera and lit some candles for atmosphere. We placed our hands on the board's planchette. Ada asked in a dramatic voice, Are there any spirits in the room with us? Nothing happened. She repeated the question, but still no dice. Allow me, Derek said, causing Ada to huff. Are there any... Before Derek could finish the question, the planchette shot forward and disappeared into the dark. The flames on the candles flickered out and engulfed the spirit box. Ada kicked the box away, and the three of us scurried backwards. Derek and Ada covered their mouths in horror. I struggled to hide my amusement. A shadowy foot protruded from the darkness and crushed the blazing spirit box, snuffing out the last remaining source of light. A tall, dark figure with long, sharp claws loomed over us. Before we could react, it had pounced on Derek and ripped him to shreds in a matter of seconds. Ada tried to run, but met the same fate before she could take her first step. I watched as the creature tore into their bodies, grinning at me, baring its sharp teeth.
Good work, kid.
I smiled back. My pleasure. I stood up and pulled out a map. I crossed out Tilwick and showed it to the creature. Where to next? It pointed towards one of the few remaining places. Very well, I said. Transferring schools can be a drag, as it's difficult to make meaningful connections. Luckily, I have one very good friend. Wherever I go. There's no such thing as ghosts. Unknown author. This is a ghost story. It's a real story. The only thing I changed was my name in the story. However, there's no such thing as ghosts. I drive for Uber, and 2 weeks ago, I picked up a mother and her son. Her son must have been about 9 years old. They both get in the car. She was very lovely. The child was just adorable. As soon as the boy got in the car, he looked at me and said, "Hi, James." I said, "Hi, what's your name?" He said, "You know my name." The mom turned around and asked him, "How do you know this man's name?" The little boy looked at her and said, "I don't know, but I like him." His mom and I started talking about how he probably saw it on her app or heard her say my name. No big deal. It was a 10-minute ride. The little boy kept on talking to me as if he knew me. I found him very entertaining and very smart for his age. Finally, we get to the destination, which was a Target. On their way out of the car, I thanked them. And I told the little kid it was nice to meet him. The boy answered back, "Hey, James, I guess none of us ever married Brenda." I was very taken aback by his comment. The mom told me he has a big imagination and he is a little troublemaker. The rest of the day I kept on thinking and thinking. Finally, I remember when I was young, about his age. I had a friend named Eric. We both had a crush on a little girl named Brenda. It was a silly crush. He was my neighbor, and he moved out a year later from our neighborhood. I heard later in high school that he had passed away from leukemia. I knew it had to be him. That must be Eric. There are no ghosts. We all come back. The Woman in Black by the Prowler. I watch her from outside my window every evening. The woman dressed in black, whose pale skin glows beneath the moonlight. She walks the grounds of my manor, searching for what I am not sure. But there are hints of sadness when she walks, traces of melancholy to her movements. Her cheeks are stained by dried tears. I believe her to be lost, adrift through time, looking for a lost love, someone she has cherished and cannot live without. Each time I see her, I flee from the seclusion of my chamber and run to the entrance of my manor. But when I open the door, she is no longer there. I shout out to her, meaning only to offer my assistance. But all that answers back is the sounds of the night. Throughout the night, she torments my dreams. I cannot escape her mysterious charms. My soul seems to be haunted by the woman in black. After countless nights of this same routine, I have taken refuge inside my chamber, the door bolted and fireplace raging with a strong flame, trying to fight off the strong chill that has entered the room. I hear the moan of her cries from outside my window. They're driving me half mad. I do believe. I'm huddled in the corner of my bed, my trance fixated on the portrait of my dearly departed love. Tonight is the anniversary of her untimely death, a loss that cracked the foundation of my very soul. How I miss her so. I stare intensely at the face of my love and notice an eerie resemblance to the woman in black. But it could not be, could it? Could the pale woman who stalks these grounds be my once lively, beautiful wife? As I was deep in thought, I suddenly heard a crash echoing from downstairs, then footsteps up the stairwell to my chambers. As I heard her cries creeping closer and ever closer, I realized the woman in black had entered my manor, and for whatever reason, she was coming for me. I began to tremble under the bedspread. Sweat began to drip from my forehead. I then saw the light that was shining through the bottom of the door darken as she reached my chamber. I sat and waited in silence, waiting for what was to come. Just then the door burst open, and in she stepped. I finally gazed upon her up close, the closest I've ever seen her. I now realized it was her. The woman in black was my love from the painting. She's returned, I exclaimed under my breath. I couldn't believe she was standing before me after all these years. As she stared at me, her cries faded away as she spoke. She told me she had been searching for something every night, and that something was me, her only love, a love that even death could not stop. I cried as she told me this, for I knew how difficult it's been being away from the love she spoke of. While I might not be dead like my love, trapped in the night, searching for our love that kept her soul from being at peace, I was, however, dead on the inside, soulless and forever filled with sadness, walking through this world, longing for the love of my dead bride. I walked over to her, and we held each other in our arms, staring into each other's eyes. I told her I couldn't continue without her for another day, not after I've seen her again, and held her in my arms. A tear fell from her beautiful hazel eye, and said, "You won't have to, my love." She then gently pushed my head slightly to the side, exposing my neck, and sank her teeth into my skin. I felt a combination of my life being drained from my body and a shot of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I felt dead, but also alive at the same time. "What's happening?" I asked, concerningly, as I felt two of my front teeth elongate and sharpen into fangs. She gently calmed me down and said, "Everything is fine, my love. Now, our love will last for life. Now, our love will be eternal." La Llorona of Punta Negra. Deleted author. La Llorona is a common urban legend known in all of Spanish-speaking America and parts of the States. Basically, she is a woman who once loved a man, but when she was refused by him, she decided it was because she had children. The story goes that she quietly took her two very young children to an irrigation ditch to play in the water, then calmly took them deeper and deeper in, and quietly held their heads under until the ripples and thrashes stopped. She ran, soaked and disheveled, to the man and confessed, thinking he would agree to marry her finally. He said no. He panicked, he struck her, and threw her out. On her way back to her small house, she passed the ditch, saw her drowned children, and lost the last shred of her sanity. She flung herself into the water and let herself drown. Now, if you believe, she wanders lakes, streams, irrigation ditches, and beaches, any water, calling out for her children. If she finds a young person, she will approach them, and upon realizing they are not hers, will attack, crying in rage and loss, and drown the individual. Her tears never stop flowing, and thus she is called the crying woman, La Llorona. I thought that was a legend, but when I moved to Lima, Peru, my mother bought a beach house in a private beach called Punta Negra, so called for its impressive black rocks jutting up into the Pacific fog, and its many large black crabs. Most families in Peru with decent income are members of country clubs, have beach houses, and so forth, so the beach was only occupied by older people and their visiting relatives. This is why I was surprised to see some teenagers diving from some taller rocks into a small canal where the water is turbulent, without supervision, while I was sitting outside my house with my mother. We were saying how they were going to get hurt, and how typical it was for these teens to be acting stupid in front of the one girl present. I went back inside after one jumped again. The next day, my mother, my brother, and I had to leave because the beach was closed due to an accident. A boy of about 17 years old had drowned when he hit a rock head first, diving in the canal the previous day. I was shocked, of course, because I probably had seen him jump and just left. When the beach reopened, the three of us went back for the rest of the week, but I was uneasy. I was 11 or 12 at the time, but found myself crying myself to sleep each night I was there, feeling sad, hopeless, and all around pathetic. It wore off during the day, so while some cousins and a military friend were chatting with my mother, I went for a swim. Suddenly, it all went black. I only felt sharp pain all over my legs and face, and salt in my mouth. I came to being carried out by the military guy. My mother, not a frantic person, explained that the waves had gotten suddenly fierce, and I had been slammed into one of the rocks, which was covered in razor-sharp mussels. Luckily, the salt water all around had prevented scarring from the jagged cuts. At this point, I started to feel not only depressed during the night, but at all hours as I was at the beach. I also began feeling terrified for no reason. The only place I felt safe was in the patio space behind the house, which was also the only place in my house without a view of the ocean. My family also began noticing odd things, especially my mother, who I believe may be a practicing druid. My mother was staying one weekend with her friend at the house, and all the large windows in the master bedroom opened without a wind, and an enormous black bird got in. My mother hated birds, so this shook her. My brother also suffered. He was 14 or 15, and more than once got into his bed only to find those large crabs and cockroaches infesting his sheets. He hates anything resembling a spider, so I'm sure the crabs gave him a small heart attack. As the summer came to a close, we decided not to use the beach house in the next summer, but my father had arrived from his tour of duty and insisted we use it and stay for the entire summer, which in that area is about 2 months. I protested heavily, but to no avail. It seemed that while everyone's fears were coming true, with my mother almost losing me and the bird, the creatures in my brother's bed, I was the only one who felt powerful pain while being there. Now that I was forced to be by the beach at all times, I started noticing frequent visitors, such as our cousins who had a house to our left, and an old couple who owned a nearby villa. I also noticed a woman, middle-aged, who never seemed to go into any house in particular. She did stop by a couple houses every other week or so, but she ambled slowly by our house every day and looked into my bedroom window as she did. It was those eyes, dark, soulless, and distorted by the tears ever present. She wore traditional Peruvian garb, which was odd because she did not look like an indigenous person, as most people in Peru with that apparel were. She was actually very beautiful, with light skin, another rarity, and a frail appearance. She was also very tall for a Peruvian woman, standing at about 180 centimeters, about 5 feet 9 inches. She both fascinated and enthralled me, but my brother only found her to be weird for peeping. He didn't find her attractive at all, but she was the only thing by the sea that did not make me feel sick. But then I started dreaming. I'm not a very peaceful sleeper. I have constant nightmares, and once when I was taking pills to prevent malaria, my dreams took on a horror I still block out, though if I want, I could remember them clearly. The dreams at Punta Negra were hundreds of times worse, filled with water, darkness, icy cold salty brine, and the sound of crying. I woke every day, wanting to just jump into the ocean and die. Near the end of the summer, my family had to go back to Lima to restock on groceries to bring back. I was too numb inside to go with them, or even leave my bed, so I ended up alone in the house. I spent my time breathing slowly and trying to feel happy, but I could only cry silently. About 30 minutes into my little moment, I heard the sliding glass door at the front of the house open and slam closed, as one might do if they were kicking it shut due to their armloads of groceries. I was motivated enough to get up and go to the kitchen to help, but it wasn't my parents or brother. It was the woman. But it was not the woman. She was dressed as usual, and with the same eyes, tear-stricken, but the similarities ended there. I immediately noticed her size, now around 150 centimeters, less than 5 feet tall, and her old shriveled face. Her clothes were faded and wet, as if they had been hand-washed in salty water many times. I made a run to the patio, but she moved like a wave and took me by the wrist. Her hand was so cold that I went into shock for a second. I was suddenly in the water. I was in the canal, between the two enormous rocks, laden with sharp black mussels and crawling with crabs. I tried fiercely to escape, but I was also buried in the sand, up to my thighs, and caught in a surge. In those moments, I experienced perfect clarity on the situation. The boy before had been pulled under by the woman, taken up in the surges of the canal, and beaten by the rocks. A natural death trap. It was the woman who had tortured me and induced tears, who had terrorized my family, and who previously had flung me into the waves to be crashed into the rocks. Now there was no escape. I admit that I let myself be overcome in that instant. I gave up, and my tears stopped flowing. Before I let go and all faded to black, I had her beautiful image in my eyes. I woke up in Lima, in my bed, in my room, in my normal house. My mother was with me and calmly explained that she had wrestled me from an old woman who was keeping my head down in the water in the canal and pulled me up from the sand. We never went back to that house or the beach, not as a family. But in my last few weeks in Lima, before I moved in June of this year, I bummed a ride off of a friend with a house there, and in the winter chill and drizzle, I walked right to the water's edge. I could hear crying. But I was not afraid. I looked behind me into the fog and saw her, La Llorona, clad in soaked traditional clothing, crying and making her way not towards me, but towards the adolescent boys playing soccer loudly on the sound, disturbing the church bell's ring from a nearby slum. I knew she had moved on, and so had I. I fought and lost to La Llorona during my stay at a beach house, but was saved by my mother. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.